you so much for joining us. Can you give us a little bit of your background growing up and what took you to law school?
Well, I was born and raised in Omaha, and I was here living in Omaha until I went off to college at the University of Nebraska. From there, of course, I went to Nebraska Law School. I never, growing up, really thought too much about being a lawyer. I really sort of thought that I wanted to be a vet, but once I got into high school and recognized that I just wasn't all that good at math, that perhaps that was not the profession for me. Interestingly enough, my grandfather was a huge influence on me. My grandfather had a third grade education. He worked on the railroad, and he was just like the smartest man. And from the time I was a little girl, my grandfather kept saying, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be a doctor. That was always the message. My growing up was somewhat turbulent. Some people know this story, some people don't, but I grew up in a very violence-filled domestic violence home. Domestic violence, I was a victim of that. Sexual abuse, I was a victim of that. My grandfather was like my salvation because my grandfather was the voice in my ear. And so by the time I graduated high school and college, that voice in my ear was saying it louder, and it was, you need to go to law school. So that's how I landed in law school.
Was that a direct undergrad to law school?
It was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you didn't go far. You went a few blocks away to the law school campus there.
That's right. I did. And when I started, back in the dinosaur age, it was the old law school.
Oh, it wasn't in the same spot? It was a different one?
No, it was the old law school. I think the architecture school took over that building. So we had the old law school for the first semester. And then we moved to the new building on the East Campus, or the new building at that time, and completed law school there.
So with the new building, what was it bigger than it needed to be? You were moving into it. Was it kind of tough to get adjusted to, or you guys were ready to go day one?
I think we were ready to go day one, but if Judge Smith Camp were here, she would tell you that it was missing an equal amount of women's bathrooms. And that became one of her passions after she got on the bench, was to raise money so that there would be another women's bathroom on the main floor of the Nebraska Law School. And by golly, she got it done. And I don't expect that you would go into the bathroom, but there is a plaque in the bathroom about Judge Smith Camp in that bathroom. But she was in my law school class. Both Dan and I were in the same law school class with Laurie. And so it's just people have different interests and different things that kind of trip their trigger. And that was something that tripped her trigger.
I was going to get into it later, but can you talk a bit about your friendship with her from the perspective of being law school classmates and everything like that? And you've talked a little bit about this in like an Inns of Court remembrance, but how she was in law school, how you remember her?
Oh my, how I remember in law school. Well, she was kind of crazy. She was dressed somewhat like a hippie, which I think a lot of people would have a hard concept wrapping their head around that. But I remember her coming into constitutional law and with a red bandana around her hair and her hair kind of flying. And she was very, very smart. That comes as no surprise. But I mean, she was just brilliant. She could answer a question or she could ask a question as good as anybody. And she in later years, we kind of talked about law school together, and some of the things that she said really surprised me. And one of the things that she had told me was, she said, in law school, she said, I never cared what grade I got. She said, I took something other than what we were required to take. She said, I took something because I thought I could get something out of it, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to get something out of it. I didn't care whether or not I got a good grade at it. And she said, there were some things that I took that I got a lot out of, but I didn't particularly get a good grade. But she said, I got what I wanted. And, what a great perspective to have going through those 3 stressful years. I just wish that she were still here so that she could counsel young law students about that. So I try and take that, because I teach at the Arizona State University Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, and I try and take those little gems from her and incorporate them when I'm teaching or when I'm having conversations with law students.
So post law school, did you know what you wanted to do with your law degree? Did you know that you want to go to a county attorney position, or how did that come?
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't even take criminal law in law school. I took environmental law and all of these warm and fuzzy things because I thought, I was going to be able to go out and save the world with these things. Well, of course, reality hits, and the reality was that back in the 70s, there were few and far between female lawyers, and it was really tough to get a job. Much less, Dan and I at that point were married, so here we were, a married couple. And interestingly enough, the Omaha law firms didn't want to hire either one of us because they were afraid of conflicts of interest. Which, when you think about it now, you think, what? But it was a reality then. So, we wound up out in western Nebraska, which you might think was a really strange place. But actually, we both wound up out there. I wound up in private practice, and Dan went to work at an accounting firm with the idea that in a year he was going to move over to the law firm. Well, he never left the accounting firm. And so, I did not become a prosecutor until 9 years after I had been privately practicing.
What private practice were you doing? Just general everything?
Oh, yeah. Cradle to grave is what you do in rural Nebraska. You do everything. When I come back to the city, everybody says, like, what do you specialize in? I'm like, well, I don't have a specialty. I do it. You do it all, whoever walks in your office. But so after 9 years of doing criminal law, defending people, I'd kind of decided that I was really tired of defending people. And I was encouraged by a group of citizens to run for county attorney. And that's what I did. And I never looked back.
How was that election?
It was hard fought. I went door to door. I was running against a law school classmate who was the incumbent. And it was hard fought. And so I went door to door and did the old grassroots thing. And that's how I became county attorney.
And then how long were you county attorney?
I was county attorney for 16 years, 4 terms. And then along the way, I picked up being county attorney in Arthur County, which was adjacent to Keith County. And then I kind of kept spreading. I would get appointed a special deputy county attorney for various counties. And so by the time I left West Nebraska and came back to Omaha, I had been in 21 counties. And again, Laurie Smith Camp would always introduce me as the closest thing to a private attorney general that the state of Nebraska has. She says, because she's everywhere. and that's just that's the nature of, I would get appointed to do a special case here or there, or somebody had a conflict, or a county attorney didn't want to do child support cases or whatever. So I would do them.
And I would guess that in some of those counties, you were the first female county attorney along the way?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And how was that, being the first?
I don't think as a well, I wasn't the first female county attorney in the county that I won. Okay, the incumbent that I beat was a female, and she was the first female county attorney. But I was the first female county attorney, maybe in Arthur County, and the first female deputy in other counties. I never really felt that I got that there was any great surprise or any great disparity in treatment by the judges. Or for that matter, well, the defendants don't have a lot of control over who's going to be the prosecutor. But yeah, even with the defense attorneys, because by that time, first of all, I'd been in private practice for 9 years. And you should understand that I continued in private practice because outside of the Omaha and Lincoln areas, the county attorneys' jobs are, quote, part-time, which just means that they can't pay enough. So they allow you to have a private practice to subsidize what they're giving you as county attorney. And so I continued on in private practice. I would take cases, obviously, that were not in conflict with anything that I did as a prosecutor. But yeah, I can't say that I really felt any real difference. Now, when I first started out there, I could tell you all, we could tape this for days, and I could tell you all sorts of stories about judges and bad behavior. But that's not what this is about.
It's not. So 16 years in to your county attorneyship, you get a call and get appointed to the U.S. Attorney.
Oh, no.
How'd that come about?
Nope, actually. Okay, so remember, I was 9 years in private practice, and 16 years after that as county attorney.
Yeah.
Dan and I decided that we were going to move back to Omaha.
Okay.
Because both of our parents were aging, and they had some needs, and so we decided that we were going to move back. And we moved back to Omaha. I went eventually into private practice with two other females, which had been a long-term goal of mine, was to have a female law firm, and I was quite happy doing that. Then I got a call from Saunders County asking if I could do their felony cases. And so I started continuing my private practice. I would go to Saunders County, do their felony cases. Well, then I got appointed as a special prosecutor in other counties, including Douglas County. And so it started, the prosecution business started overtaking again. It was sort of like that line in The Godfather where Al Pacino says, "Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in." That's kind of what happened to me. So I'd been doing that for several years, and then along came the election, Obama, and I was asked to serve as the U.S. Attorney.
Who were the other two female attorneys in the firm with you?
Monica Kruger and Ann Troya.
Okay.
Yeah, they were my partners, and they're my lifelong friends, and they always will be. So
you've traveled this state. You've been basically everywhere. You must have put a ton of miles on your cars over the years. You must have had a lot of windshield time driving to and from around.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would put 50,000 miles a year on my car, traveling. Windshield time. Yeah. But you know what? It was great because I got to know a lot of places. I got to meet and become familiar with a lot of judges, a lot of attorneys in those areas. So that was all very good.
And let's talk a little bit about your time as U.S. Attorney. You oversee, in that position, a firm of how many attorneys?
Well, at that time, there were 26 assistant U.S. attorneys, and then we had a number of special assistant U.S. attorneys, probably about an equal amount. And so all told, I think with staff, support staff and attorneys and so forth, probably around 70.
That's a big operation.
It's a big operation. It's spread among two offices because Omaha has the main office and Lincoln has the branch office. It's a big operation, but absolutely wonderful people, career prosecutors that had been there and knew how the place ran, and I really felt coming in that, and I've always felt this as a leader or as a manager, is that come in, try and figure out how the place runs operationally, and if it's running well, try not to mess with it. Let the professionals do their job. And in the case of the U.S. Attorney's Office, there were professionals that were doing an exceptional job. So that made it easy for me.
One thing that I saw, was the work you did to improve prosecutions on tribal lands or tribal people. Can you speak a little bit about that?
The Native American issues with domestic violence is an issue then and still was very near and dear to me. I had the honor of being appointed by then Attorney General Eric Holder to head a task force having to do with domestic violence against Native American women. As part of that, there were 4 pilot projects in the nation where what happened is that we hired an assistant U.S. attorney and we expected them to spend their time on the reservations, so boots on the ground, because so many of the cases involving domestic violence never make it from law enforcement over to the prosecutor because of the familial relationships that there are. Everybody's related to everybody on the reservations. And so, and the rate of domestic violence is higher among Native American women than any group, than 90 percentiles. Okay, this is shocking. And so by actually putting somebody, boots on the ground, and starting to build a level of trust with law enforcement, tribal law enforcement, but also for the domestic violence shelter or the individuals that were working domestic violence, knowing that they could go to this person and talk with them, it increased the prosecutions by 43%. I mean, it works.
Yeah.
It works. Unfortunately,
I was going to ask you, but still.
The sad story is after a year, the Department of Justice didn't fund it. And oh my gosh, I made so many trips to Washington, D.C. I taught at the Department of Interior. I talked until I was blue in the face. And finally, we decided if we couldn't do it one way, we would do it another. It's against federal law for any entity to fund a federal project.
Right.
So, because what we worked out was that actually the Sherwood Foundation funded that project, and they gave a grant to the grant administrator for the 3 tribes. And so they gave the money to the tribes that enabled that project to continue on. And it was still in existence at the time I left U.S. Attorney's Office, but I think maybe that grant has expired, and I don't know what the status is, unfortunately, since that time.
But I mean, it just maybe it bears repeating, or maybe I'm just slow, that without that project or without that attorney on the ground, victims would not actually get the perpetrator prosecuted. They would still be, around that person. The person would be out free to do it to somebody else or to them again. I mean,
That's
is
correct.
just, that cycle doesn't stop
That's correct.
if you don't
That's
prosecute
correct.
that person.
That's correct. That's what needs to happen. I mean, and you need to have the services in place. You need to have the safe houses for the victims to go to, but you also need to have the services in place for even if you put these offenders in prison, they're going to come back to the reservation, most likely. So it's a different dynamic than any place else. And so you have to give a lot of thought to what services are going to be available to make sure that this individual has the anger management counseling, has the type of services that they need to be able to break the cycle, because they're going to come back. And I just think that's really, really important. And I'm still very, very interested in fact, in December, I went off to a conference where I was a speaker for the Native American Tribal Council and Housing Alliance. And what they do is provide a lot of grants to tribal housing. And so I wanted to talk about tribal housing and about the individuals that manage tribal housing, how important it is for them to have their eyes open about what's happening in tribal housing. And we talked a lot about, being on the property and being alert for signs that there's domestic violence going on. One of the things that he found incredibly encouraging at that particular conference was there were several Native American men that were present who got up and spoke and said, yes, we need to be responsible for what's happening on the reservation. We need to, we as men need to step out and start talking about this. And I found that incredibly encouraging. So I'm very involved and still continuing with, that's all kind of part of what I've done since I've supposedly retired is to try and find things like that or do things like that help with women empowerment, help with social issues that affect women.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, and I'm going to get the name wrong, Fearless.
Fearless. I get the name wrong too. Fierce, Fearless, and Forward. Okay, that's an organization that I started that is sort of a vehicle for myself and others to be able to go out and do things, to talk to Native American groups and throw out ideas about domestic violence, but also to go out and talk to women about leadership skills, negotiation skills. Women, even women lawyers, aren't very good at advocating for themselves. I found rapidly in doing the negotiation skills, I was doing negotiation skill workshops for female physicians, and I was really shocked when I found out, how few of them had the slightest idea about how to advocate for themselves salary-wise. And over that 2-day conference, I offered, stupidly, that I would give 15-minute free consultations to anybody who wanted to sign up. And I said, well, I would do it for, a couple hours. Oh my gosh. The person at the front desk came and said, I've got this all filled, plus I have over here this huge waiting list of people. So I wound up over the 2 days doing 57 of these little workshops. But I also dragged, and I have to give credit to Judy Schweiger, because she was with me, and I dragged her into it. So both she and I did that together, but it was exhausting. But at the same time, it was also, gosh, look at this void that's out there. And if we have women professionals who aren't comfortable doing this stuff or advocating for themselves, how many other areas, business areas, can we be of help? And it's, countless numbers.
And in talking with Jennifer Peterson a little bit about this, she mentioned maybe there's something like a kind of a salary survey that's going on to even aggregate more of that information past just the individual situations, but kind of more get a wider group of information and sort of present that.
Well, the American Bar Association has done it on a national level, and of course, the American Medical Association has also done it. Interestingly enough, women physicians and female lawyers aren't that different in terms of the gender disparity in the profession. And, I can't speak for probably the most recent figures, but there's about a 23 to 25% gender disparity.
75 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Still. Illegal.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is significant. What do we need to do as a profession better? What can get us to parity?
Well, number one, you have to acknowledge, first of all, you have to identify the problem. Second of all, you have to acknowledge the problem. And then third, you have to figure out, as you suggest, what do we do to get us to parity? I think education with law firms, the larger law firms, because by and large, that's where you see this gender disparity occurring, is in the larger law firms. And it may not start out that way. It may start out that everybody comes in as an associate and they're paid X amount, but then as things advance, and you also have the factor of female attorneys trying to juggle work-life balance and families. So you have female attorneys that may be stepping away for a while because they're having families, and so when they step back in, then you have the disparity in the salary. On the other hand, you have the male attorneys who think, well, she left the firm and I've been here working away, and so I deserve to make more than she does because I've stayed the course. So you've got that whole dynamic going on.
Well, and I like to think that the market we're in right now, with a huge need, locally at least, for attorneys, for younger attorneys, is opening up the firm's minds to understanding, everything better. How can we appreciate our attorneys more? How can we make sure that we're treating them well? And I would hope that it would lead to rethinking the old way of how it's been done and been unequal.
Dave, you're so right. I think that we are at a point, I don't want to say post-pandemic, but as we're starting to move out of the pandemic, I think the whole work model has changed so drastically for men and women that it does open up these possibilities. If you had talked to a major law firm partners 2 years ago or 3 years ago about working from home, oh my gosh, that would have been, no way would that happen. But it's happened, and found out that, this isn't a bad work model. And so I think it's opening up eyes to there are other ways we can go about doing this, making the lawyers happy, and getting the job done.
So in that vein of things changing, I'd love to get your perspective on criminal prosecution and how that has evolved, or sentencing and criminal prosecution, and the job you did from when you stopped being in the position and to now, even if you have any thoughts on where things have gone there. If not, that's fine.
Well, I do, and I don't mean this as any disrespect to anybody who's doing the job now. I've done a lot of thinking about when I've done prosecutions where we had people that were transporting marijuana, and the number of individuals have wound up being incarcerated during my term, during the time that I was county attorney. and we prosecuted all these individuals for marijuana, and we made them go to prison. And it makes you sort of rethink that whole thing as you're seeing all the decriminalization. Probably not unlike prohibition. Years ago with history, sending people away because they were in possession of, moonshine, and then all of a sudden it's legal. And I think that the studies have shown that there's such a disparity in the individuals that are being sent to prison for these types of offenses racially. And I think we have to step back and say, what are we doing? We need to look at the bigger picture and decide what's more important for us to be prosecuting. And so I would say to you, after being out of the game for 5 years, if I were to go back, yeah, there were things I would do different. Absolutely. I would be much, much more aware of the disparities, the racial disparities, and I would try very hard to engage in different models of prosecution, of reform of criminal justice.
We're very excited to give you the Laurie Smith Camp Integrity and Service Award. You're only the second recipient. Judy Gosh was a recipient last year. And could you talk just a bit more maybe about your relationship with Laurie and what she meant to you?
Oh my. Well, Laurie was my good friend. As a person, I thought that she was a very kind person, she had a lot of interests. She loved to garden. Willa Cather was her favorite. Loved to travel. We had lots of conversations regarding traveling and just things of mutual interest. We had a little group that met every other month. I don't know if you heard about this, but we had a wine and cheese group, and wine being WHINE is how that was spelled. And it was just composed of just a few of us, and we would just have a hilarious time. And we would talk about everything and anything, nothing law related. And she was funny. She was just a good friend. She was somebody I could call, and we could laugh about something. And she was there, and now she's not, but she's with us in other ways. So
absolutely. You're teaching right now, and you've mentored and taught a lot of people over the years. For young attorneys or law students watching this, or even younger, any words of wisdom or advice for them, and anything that you think they should keep close to them when they're thinking about how they're going to practice, or maybe even what they're going to do in practice?
As I've told you before, I like to wrap some thoughts that over the years Laurie would impart to my students. But there's going back to the fearless and forward and the women empowerment thing. One of the things that I have discovered over the years of my teaching as an adjunct is that I'll get young female lawyers or lawyers to be in my class, and about 3/4 of the way through, inevitably I have one or two or more of them who will come to me and say, you know what, I was just taking this class because I just never thought I could be a litigator, but I've decided, but I can be a litigator. And so to me, to have a student come up and say that to me is everything. It's why I keep teaching, is because obviously something in that teaching area impacted this individual and empowered them to believe that they could become a litigator. One of the things that I stress with my students from the get-go is about cordiality and collegiality in the law, something that I think is lost, and that something it took me a long time, because I'm a slow learner, to realize, and that is that you should never let somebody else's bad behavior dictate yours. And that's the one thing I tell them over and over. You're going to get out and practice. You're going to have that one law firm or lawyer or whomever that is just atrocious when you're dealing with them. And you're going to find that your behavior will start to slide that way as well. And there'll come a day where you stop and go, I don't like myself. I don't like the practice of law. I don't like what it's done to me. You can avoid all of that if you just remember that take the high road. Don't become that atrocious lawyer so that you can match them. That's not who you are. That's not what the practice of law is about. And go forward and go home every night and be proud of what you did and be proud of how you behaved. Because you are, as a lawyer, as a law student, you're a role model for somebody. And you want to make sure that you are the type of role model that you would like to have had.
Very well said. Very well said. And I love the first part too on, I think a lot of times we're told you can't do this or you shouldn't do this. Right?
Oh, no. I'm very much, talk to me about what it is that you want to do with my students. I always want, and students stay in touch with me from year to year. And I had, when I was teaching at Nebraska, I had one of the lost boys of Sudan in my class. And he was wonderful. And I went to his TED Talk. And his TED Talk and things that he had undergone. And he got a job as an assistant DA in the Manhattan DA's office. And I just saw that he got put on the top 40 lawyers under 40 in Manhattan. And I remember when he left my class, I said, someday you're going to be the Secretary General of the UN. And he said, Professor, you'll be the first person I call. And I'm like, I hope I'm still alive. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that's the job of an educator. That's the job of a leader, is to help others become the best person that they can be, or to bring out that best side of them. Another example, and I know I'm talking too long here, Dave, but gosh, I have the most wonderful, diverse students. This past year, I had a student who has a bunch of family in Ukraine. And Joseph's family came from Russia. So Joseph's first language until he was 7 was Russian. But his family lives in LA. And as we've gone through the semester with the whole Ukraine thing, and every week in the law school, in ASU law school is 1,000 students. It's huge. It's 6 floors, but on every floor there's a big open space between the classrooms, sort of like courtyards. You can sit out there. So students always know I'm there early, and I'm sitting out in the courtyard, and it's like a free for all. Whoever wants to come over and have a chat. So every week, Joseph and I would talk about what's going on, because he would read all the Russian or watch the Russian language TV segments and so forth. The beginning, the whole Ukraine thing, he said, Professor, as soon as I graduate, he goes, I'm not going to take the bar. He said, my 18-year-old son or brother and I were going to go to the Ukraine and fight. Wow. And the mother in me comes out and I said, I don't think that's a real good idea, Joseph, but I understand. And so as the semester has progressed, it's sort of moved from that. At one point I said to him, you're a lawyer, not a soldier. Okay, you can do things as a lawyer to help your people. Go to Poland, work in the refugee camps, or take the bar. And he always intended that he was going to practice on his own because he didn't want to work for a big firm. And I said, practice and do immigrant practice and help the Ukrainians that are going to be coming into the country. And of course, 10 of them were already living in his family home of 3 bedrooms back in LA. And so as the semester has progressed, we've moved away from the I'm going to go over there and fight part to I need to think more about the bigger picture in terms of what I can do to help. So, that to me is mentorship, and it's listening. It's maybe making a suggestion or two, and then seeing how they develop with that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can't tell them what to do.
No.
That's never going to work.
No.
It's mostly listening and a few suggestions here and there to nudge them.
But it's been extremely interesting to sort of go through the experience in a small part with him, and that's a great part about teaching trial advocacy, having a smaller group of students and getting to know them. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'm so thankful that we got the chance to sit down with you. We'll see you at LawDay to give you the award there. Thank you so much.